NET, the Political News Talk Network.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Every American school child knows the phrase taken from a poem on the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. Tonight, a close look at America's immigration history. What you learn may not set well with what you learned in school. Stay with us tonight on BorderLine. Good evening and welcome to BorderLine. I'm Casey McAlpin, Deputy Director of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, filling in for Dan Stein. Images of ships teeming with immigrants, landing at Ellis Island, the famous poem by Emma Lazarus inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, millions of old world immigrants finding unparalleled opportunity in the United States during the last great wave of immigration at the turn of the century. Tonight on BorderLine, we'll take a close look at that great American experience and much earlier waves of American immigration in an effort to discover the truth behind the cliches and mythology that surrounds today's debate over immigration. But first, let's take a look at the stories making the news this week. Leading the news last week were new projections by the Immigration and Naturalization Service showing legal immigration rising sharply in 1996 and 1997. There was an immediate response from Capitol Hill where angry Republican leaders claimed the Immigration Service had deliberately withheld these projections from Congress at a critical juncture in the recent debate over reducing immigration in the House. The new projections show legal immigration rising 41% in 1996. Together with refugees, admissions are now expected to total 1 million this year. Immigration reform legislation took a step forward last week when the Senate took up S-1664, a bill sponsored by Immigration Subcommittee Chairman Alan Simpson. Simpson, and proponents of legal immigration reduction, suffered a setback, however, when his amendment to make a 10% reduction in legal immigration was defeated by a vote of 80 to 20. The Senate is expected to complete action on the bill early this week. In other news last week, the Immigration and Naturalization Service released Fazia Kazinga, aged 19, an African woman from Togo who had been held by the INS pending her appeal for political asylum on the basis of her opposition to the practice of female genital mutilation in her home country. Her case is scheduled to be heard by an immigration court May 2nd and could set a precedent for the admission of women claiming political asylum from countries where this is a common cultural practice. But America is a land of immigrants. That phrase is cited again and again by those who seek to justify today's record level of U.S. immigration. What does it mean? After all, aren't virtually all nations today nations of immigrants? While it's true immigration has played an important and historic role in the founding and settling of America, our history is anything but a relentless, unending wave of immigration. Our special correspondent, Jacqueline Mitchell, gives us a different look at this celebrated aspect of American history.
The earliest evidence of immigration to America occurred some 10,000 years ago as nomads from Asia crossed the frozen Bering Straits into Alaska. European migration is a much more recent phenomenon. The first permanent European immigrants sailed to what would eventually become the United States, arriving in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. A slow trickle continued over the next century and a half. By 1776, some 4 million people of European origin occupied the original 13 colonies. After independence, low-level immigration continued. Immigrants were expected to assimilate into a cultural, political, and economic framework based on British common law. The Irish potato famine and political upheavals in Central Europe led to a brief spurt of immigration in the late 1840s and 50s. But public opposition and the onset of the Civil War ended large-scale immigration. Next came the Industrial Revolution, which created a new demand for immigration among employers reluctant to hire black workers. In his book, The Case Against Immigration, author Roy Beck points out high European immigration blocked access by ex-slaves to merging industrial jobs in the North. Black leaders of the time complained bitterly about the harmful impact of immigration. The last great wave of immigration ended in 1924 and remained low for another 40 years. When Congress amended the law in 1965, fewer than 300,000 immigrants were admitted into the United States each year. In spite of promises the 1965 reforms would not increase immigration, levels have more than tripled over the last 30 years and show no sign of slowing down anytime soon. For BorderLine, I'm Jacqueline Mitchell.
Thanks, Jackie, for that overview of our immigration history. While immigration enthusiasts want us to believe that reducing immigration would be an affront to our history, as Jacqueline's report points out, periods of mass immigration, such as those experienced today, have been the exception in American history, not the rule. Today, the great turn-of-the-century wave of immigration is celebrated by immigration enthusiasts as an unqualified American success story and positively affirmed by many standard school texts. After all, most of today's Americans can trace their ancestry directly to those or to earlier immigrants. But what was the actual experience of Americans with this period of mass immigration at the time? Were the voices raised against immigration only those of narrow-minded bigots and nativists? And what about the role of myth? To help understand the myths that dominate and perhaps distort today's immigration debate, we're delighted to have as our guest Otis Graham, a faculty member at the University of California at Santa Barbara and history professor at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, and author of several books including A Limited Bounty, the United States Since World War II. It's great to have you with us, Otis.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's start with that famous poem on the Statue of Liberty. What can you tell us about that?
It's an amazing story, really, how a statue which was presented by the French people and the French government to the United States out of admiration for the democratic achievements of the U.S., and the statue was understood to represent liberty and the achievement of the U.S. at embodying political liberty. And in 1886, that it was planted in the New York Harbor. It could have been put in Philadelphia, it could have been put in San Francisco or someplace in Maine, but they decided to put it in New York.
But what about the inscription, the poem? Was that...
The image of the statue originally, the French intention and the American acceptance was the statue is our appreciation of your embodiment of liberty. She's the Lady of Liberty. 3 years before, in order to raise money to build the pedestal and the statue, there was a poetry contest, not very widely noted. A young Jewish poetess, Emma Lazarus, I've never known quite how to pronounce her name, you hear different ways, submitted a poem. She didn't win, and it's the poem you quoted from. It was absolutely unnoticed and not noted.
At the time the
statue was planted. The statue had to do with liberty.
Right.
Had to do with liberty. By an amazing series of steps, which really almost amount in a way to a conspiracy, although not very well controlled in the 20th century. 17 years later, the next step was taken toward transforming the image of the Statue of Liberty from liberty to having something to do with immigration, which it didn't have to do in the beginning. It had nothing to do with immigration. It happened to be set up there in the harbor, but 17 years later, a friend of Emma, who had died of cancer, framed her poem and put it inside on a wall without any celebration, without any news, without anybody noting. This is 1903, when the poem finally gets stuck in a kind of a corner. Well, it's a long story and you don't have time for it. And most people don't know this story. But by a series of steps, most of them taken in the 50s and the 60s, a group of interested people who wanted this image of the statue to be associated with immigration, not with liberty. I mean, they weren't against liberty, but they wanted to shifted it, And Franklin Roosevelt himself played a part in this. He gave an important speech at the 50th anniversary of the statue. They began to transform the symbolism of the statue from liberty to immigration and refugees and the wretched of the earth and the poor.
I see. So it's sort of like it's something that really it became an icon but was kind of captured in a sense.
I think it was essentially sort of carried away. I mean, and it's interesting that those who wanted to transform the Statue of Liberty into a symbol of receptivity to the poor and refugees didn't have any opposition. Nobody stepped forward and said, wait a minute, the original meaning of liberty has got to be defended. You can't do this. No one did, and so it was just a slow, inexorable process.
Okay. As we saw in that taped report by Jackie, the idea that unrelenting immigration has always been true of American history is not really true. What's your comment on that?
An historian listening to the conversation in the last few years is astonished. The idea that today's massive levels of immigration have been the way we've always run this country is unhistorical, anti-historical, and frankly wrong. The immigration history of the country is long periods of low immigration, a surge of immigration before the Civil War, shut down to lower levels of immigration, very low levels of immigration for the first 150 years of a colonial era, 3,000, 4,000 people. Then another surge of immigration from 1880s to the 1920s, and that was closed down. And then we had a surge in the 1960s, which is now going on. So if you look at the picture of American immigration, it's essentially been low levels with surges and pauses.
Why did these great surges and pauses really take place? What was sort of the underlying factors and all that?
I think we've had 3 surges and 2 pauses. And whether we'll have another pause is the question. The first surge was Irish potato famine and came out of
Let's pick this up after the break. We'll be right back. Call us with your comments on the history of immigration at 1-800-5000-NET. We want to hear from you. More with Otis Graham when we return.
Imagine being able to talk to the terrorist group that claims responsibility for bombings in Israel, the man who represents freedom for millions of Chinese, or a former director of the CIA. Imagine picking up your phone and talking to these people. Stop imagining. Watch and call into Worldwise every Wednesday at 10 Eastern. If it made news in the world today, it's on Worldwise this week, only on NET, the Political News Talk Network.
So you've chosen to be your own boss. Running your own business means doing what you love and doing what you do best, except one thing you don't love one bit: doing the books. Well, now you can say goodbye to your bookkeeping hassles forever, because the makers of Quicken have invented QuickBooks, the #1 selling accounting software that makes it fast and easy to do the things you don't love doing, like paying bills, writing invoices, figuring out what your customers owe, even tracking inventory and doing payroll. QuickBooks makes it all hassle-free. How's this for fast information? A click, and QuickBooks shows you this quarter's income and expenses. And look, a few keystrokes, and QuickBooks does your invoicing for you, and then does the bookkeeping automatically. So you can get back to doing what you do best, growing your business. It's even easy to try QuickBooks. Call now to get a trial version for just $8 through this special limited-time TV offer.
That number is 1-800-518-2525.
America on Track, your weekly connection to America's #1 railroad, comes down the line every Friday evening at 10 on NET. With travel tips, great vacation destinations, route information, the latest upgrades, everything you need to know to stay on track. Tune in Friday at 10 on NET, the Political News Talk Network.
We want to hear from you. Email us at border@fcref.org or fax us at 202-544-2405 or call us at 1-800-5000-NET. Okay. Otis, when we left and we were talking about the causes of the lulls and the waves, and obviously, I mean, I can imagine that things like the potato famine in Ireland, that sent a big surge of people over. What about the things that brought people to this country?
The point I should have made, well, what brought people to this country is a better way of life and liberty and the things that we all cherish. The point I should have made is that when the surges came, we've had 3 big waves, and when the surges came, the American people who were already here resisted these in many ways. They welcomed certain levels of immigration, but immigration is complicated. It has a plus and a minus. It always has. There's always been resistance. And both of the former waves were basically closed down to a former level of very low immigration. We returned to a low level of immigration.
And would the country been significantly different if we hadn't had these big lulls? I mean, would our situation be a lot different today?
It seems clear to this historian that the lulls and the pauses were very important for absorbing the enormous numbers that had come in these brief and exceptional periods of large numbers. Both pauses were very important, and they shouldn't be forgotten.
Okay, I think we got a caller here who wants to come in on this conversation, so why don't we take them? Is it Urson from Kirsten? Urson, yeah, from Fairfax, Virginia. Urson, you're on the air with BorderLine.
How you doing, sir?
Hope I got your name right.
Yes, you did.
Good.
My question is not kind of related thus far to your topic tonight, but somehow dealing with immigrants. The impression being given is that immigrants are coming into the country, those who come into the country, and that after a while they do get a social security card, and it has and it's not valid for employment or something of the sort. They do find that we're working out, going to work, etc., etc. I'm an African American, right? And to cut this down from happening, what has been done to stop this from happening?
You mean what has been done to stop immigration from happening?
No, immigrants coming in and
getting false Social Security cards and things like that?
Yeah, making false Social Security card and working.
Well, unfortunately, nothing has been done. The bills before the House and the Senate that have been worked on this spring both contain provisions to tighten up on that eligibility for work by kind of focusing on a verification of the Social Security number. That key reform in the bills was stripped out of the House bill and the Senate bill by a coalition of Republicans and Democrats, and that's a significant setback for trying to control illegal immigration. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you for that call. Otis, let's come back a little bit and talk about this history, because, when I look around the world and travel to other countries like Australia, you always see this image of whatever the country's origins were, that it gets romanticized and painted into something that approaches myth about the heroic founders of the nation. Is that sort of a thing that we're living with today? Is that continuing to happen with the great turn of the century wave? And wasn't it just a golden era of immigration?
What's surprising about the way we hear immigration discussed now is to an historian, is that it is described by some people as invariably a positive and enriching experience, which it is in part, without having any downside. It always had a downside. In history, it always had a downside. If you study the Founding Fathers, and I'm talking about Washington and Jefferson and Franklin and Madison, they welcomed immigration. They expected Europeans, especially, to settle the continent. But they recognized that immigration was a problem, assimilation was a problem. They had a complicated, I think an appropriately complicated sense that immigration is a mixed thing. Some people in the U.S. in the last few decades have lost that. Mm-hmm. They seem to think that anybody with a critical view of immigration, seeing the other side of immigration, must be in some way, then they use names like nativist and so on, whereas the rich American tradition is to see immigration always as a complicated thing, bringing both pluses and minuses, always, and never is a good idea for it to be out of control.
Okay. One of the pictures, and I want to come right to the heart of a tough question, and that is we see presented in history books about the opponents of past immigration, is that, as you mentioned in nativists, that they were basically motivated by racism and just wanted to keep people like themselves, unlike themselves, out of the country. Is there truth to that?
On a television show, I can't do justice to this. Nativism has become a simple concept. It shouldn't be a simple concept. Nativists in the U.S. included an awful lot of fine people and mixed emotions. The nativist impulse was both sometimes regrettably anti-foreign, but it quite often was an expression of indigenous local people who knew that they were being hurt, who knew that immigration volume and the ability to assimilate was going too fast, trying to raise questions from their own neighborhoods, questions about jobs, questions about economic impact, especially black Americans. If you want to call black Americans nativists, then you're beginning to realize that when they complain about immigration, maybe they occasionally, more often than occasionally, had their hands on the reality.
I read a little history in preparation for the show tonight, and one of the things that came out was the Know Nothing Party, which was the Order of the Star Spangled Banner. Something was founded, I think, was around 1850, but that was in the aftermath of the European reaction to the Republican movement, which is really democracy movement in Europe, and where Metternich and his ally, the Pope Pius IX in Rome, suppressed the democratic movement in Europe, and a lot of the Know Nothing so-called party, this Order of the Star Spangled Banner, was opposed to immigration because they were afraid the people that were going to come in were going to be autocrats and want to put a monarch in place, or we're not going to have the same democratic traditions that we did in the United States. Had nothing to do with the fact that they were Irish or Germans and things like that.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
All right, we'll come back in just a minute. We want to hear from you. Call us at 1-800-5000-NET.
Music presents Hollywood Hit Parade. 2 full hours of great music by all your favorite singers.
Over the rainbow.
Bing Crosby.
I'm in the mood.
Rosemary Clooney. Vic Damone. Perry Como.
Shadow.
Tony Bennett. Then you'll have the opportunity to enjoy other fabulous Hit Parade albums. Hollywood Hit Parade is not sold in stores, so please call now.
Call 1-800-509-4343 and pay only $14.99 for 3 cassettes or $16.99 for 2 CDs plus $3.50 shipping. Use your credit card or send check or money order to Hollywood Hit Parade, P.O. Box 2727, Department 35, Costa Mesa, California.
Fact. With banks, you're guaranteed to never receive more than 7% on your money. Fact. So-called securities like stocks and bonds are far from being secure. Fact. With government-regulated commodities exchange-traded options, all of your risks are predetermined, but your profit potentials are unlimited. Fact. Right now, due to record export demand, a shortage is developing in grain supplies, creating opportunities that are staggering. Call Universal Commodity Corporation today for the facts on how $5,000 invested in the right market at the right time could turn into $20,000 or more in less than 3 months. Call now to see if you qualify to receive a comprehensive information kit that explains all the facts. There is no cost or obligation, so call Universal Commodity Corporation today and discover which commodities to profit from in the 90s.
Okay, we're here talking with Otis Graham about the history of U.S. immigration. Otis, before we continue with this, I'd like to take another call from one of our viewers. Mike from Toma, Wisconsin, you're on the air with BorderLine.
Thank you, Casey. That's very nice. I'm enjoying your program. You have a great program. And the doctor there, I enjoy what he's saying. I just want to say that I'm thinking back to immigration. When my parents came in, or my ancestors from Norway, I'm third generation. And at that time, the United States was open for expansion, jobs all over the place. They wanted to settle people here or there, here or there, here or there. The Native American, forgive me for saying this, but we came and did what we did. In those days, immigration was with lots of jobs.
Well,
in the 1900s, or the early 1900s, they were shipping people all the way out to Montana and different parts of the country, west.
Mike, you're absolutely right, and I think you raised two important points there. Otis, would you like to comment about that?
I think he's pointing out something very important as I hear it, and that is that one of the dubious history comments that you hear these days is that because we absorbed 30 million people 100 years ago, we can absorb enormous numbers now. So many things have changed to make that a very, very, very questionable statement. We were a much more empty country. We had an industrial economy that had a room for millions of unskilled laborers to move up the economic ladder. We had a strong host culture and the assimilation was managed in a different way. These three and other fundamental things have changed so that 100 years later, for people to say that, look, you guys worried 100 years ago about the volumes and about the assimilation problem, and we got through it. And the final thing that changed is we had a pause. We had the laws of the 20s, and we had a 40 to 50 year pause. So for people to say that you got through it once and you're naturally going to get through it again is a butchery of history, I think, in a very distorted thing.
I agree with you. I think, I can remember from my own childhood going up, and my mother's parents lived in Youngstown, Ohio, visiting that city and some other northern cities, and you could still see in the 50s and 60s the remnants of these great immigrant ghettos that had basically been formed around the turn of the century. And there were the Polish and the Ukrainians and the Irish and the Italians, and then just gradually, after that long 40-year period, those ghettos sort of like blended in. They melted down into the fabric of American society. But today, the only reason that happened is because we closed the door.
Casey, massive immigration has looked good twice in American history because we had a long pause. It's the third one we're now in without any sign of a pause. We may be making a different history here.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the question you touched on earlier, and that's one major group of Americans who don't really look back at that great turn-of-the-century wave with sort of the same warm feelings that you or I and many others may have, and I'm referring to African-American minorities who didn't come here as willing immigrants to begin with. And what was their experience through that time, and how did this big huge demographic shift or influx impact them?
One of the interesting things about our history, as we historians have written it, is that we haven't been very good on that question, I think. I've done some study and others have. The African American historical experience, as we now reconstruct it, and we are reconstructing it, we've left the immigration out. But if you start to look, African American leaders, starting with Booker T. Washington and before Frederick Douglass, they had much to say about immigration. They virtually begged the white power structure of this country not to inundate the country with third world manpower. Put down your bucket where you are. Let blacks do the work. Let blacks be at the bottom and work up. And this is a theme in African American history that we need to pay more attention to.
Great, thank you. We'll come back. We'll continue talking with Otis Graham. We look forward to hearing from you too.
The Army National Guard has been serving Americans ever since there has been an America, and we will always be here, giving our best to our communities, preserving our freedoms, protecting our way of life. We're America's citizen soldiers. We're mechanics, businessmen, farmers, nurses, teachers, neighbors. Proud to be part of the communities we serve. The Army National Guard, Americans at their best.
Now, you say this is a feminist agenda and it's pushed by the feminist movement. Have they excluded those who do not share that agenda?
Yes, they have. In fact, there are some on the liberal side. There are people who are unhappy.
If it's out there, it's on here. American Family, weeknights at 5 Eastern.
The philosopher John Locke believed society should be governed by a social contract of obligations between society and its citizens. Today's runaway immigration threatens to unravel the delicate fabric of the social contract which holds America together. The Social Contract Quarterly Journal focuses on immigration, population, language, and social cohesion with in-depth reporting and fascinating feature articles. Call today and subscribe for the special TV rate of $19.95.
Golf Digest introduces 8 ways to a better golf game. It can help you experience a game that's better all around. Get the 8 ways to a better golf game video. It's guaranteed to improve your game, and it's free with your paid subscription.
Order 12 issues of Golf Digest for just $19.77 now and get the latest video free. Call 800-544-6400. That's 800-544-6400.
Welcome back. We're talking with history professor and author Otis Graham about the history of U.S. immigration. But before we go on with our conversation with Dr. Graham, I'd like to take a couple of calls from you, the viewers at home. Tom from Burke, Virginia, you're on the air with BorderLine.
Yes, sir. Thanks for taking the call. I've been a member for FAIR for about 10 years now, and I'm also with INS as an active duty member. But the thing that really has bothered me over the recent years is that polls I think FAIR has taken have indicated that 80% of the American electorate are in favor of lessened immigration levels. But for whatever unknown reason, the people on Capitol Hill never seem to get the message. They always seem to cater to special interest groups and that type of thing. And I wonder if you gentlemen could comment on that.
Otis, do you have any words of explanation or understanding you can share with Tom?
Only that the disconnect between our political leaders in the last 4 decades lately is a subject that's of interest of any historian and any political scientist in the last few years. Immigration is one prime example. It's not the only example of a situation in which the public opinion is clear. Polls on immigration have been absolutely reliable. And I'm not speaking of just white Americans. All Americans want lower numbers. The number of Americans who want higher numbers has dropped from 13 to 4%. It's an enormous expression of American, and yet the Congress goes and appears even this year to be going in the wrong direction, a direction in the teeth of this public opinion. It's a puzzle for all of us and an important puzzle.
But wasn't there a precedent, if we look back 100 years ago, that the first time that Congress passed legislation to stop immigration or restrict it, let's say severely cut back on immigration, was 1897. And if my history is correct, they passed laws 10 times between 1897 and 1921 when they finally did succeed in getting some. So there was the same sort of war between the general interest of the population represented by the Congress and the industrialists, the cheap labor interests that wanted to continue to bring these people in large numbers. Let's go to another caller here. Bill from Moorhead, Kentucky. You're on the air with BorderLine.
Yes. I'd just like to make the comment that if somebody wants to come to this country and make a better life for themselves and live in a place that's free, we shouldn't try to keep them out, especially after the genocide of the Native American Indians by our forefathers that came from Europe. We have no right to say anything to anybody.
Okay, Bill, thanks for your comments. Otis, do you have a response? I kind of, when in my mind, I think about the famous story with, was the Indian chief with General Grant? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
You better tell me.
With President Grant, that this supposedly is a true story. Now, you're the historian, so you can, but that there was an incident where a delegation of American Indians from the West visited with General Grant, who was then President Grant, in the White House. And one of the chiefs said to the president, President Grant, I have one piece of advice for you. Be careful with your immigration policies. We were pretty careless with ours.
Whether that happened or not,
you're not going to.
The gentleman who just called you and spoke for an open border position, that's not been a part of the American mainstream. The American mainstream has been immigration's got to be limited. We can't take everybody in the world. But no historian can speak beyond that, except to say that that's a very unusual view that he has and not represented generally in mainstream public opinion.
Right, that's true. I think the last time I saw a poll, there was only 2% in this recent Roper poll that thought immigration should be unlimited or increased, which is basically the position of the Wall Street Journal. In his new book, The Case Against Immigration, Roy Beck makes a point that before the big wave of immigration, that U.S. wages on average were about 136% higher than those prevailing in Europe at the time. And then afterwards, we'd fallen way behind in terms of our wages against European wages at the time. Is that you're a labor specialist? That's part of your.
I remember that argument in Roy Beck's book, and I think we all want to think more about it. I'm not so sure about that. I am convinced by Roy Beck and others who make an associated argument, and that is that whenever we have restricted immigration and tightened the labor market, wages have gone up for average people. Every time we shrink immigration and tighten the labor market, wages go up for average people. That can't be an accident. It fits with economic theory. It fits in history. It happens every time. So I would say that all this argument today about raising the minimum wage, historically, if you want to make life a little better and wages a little better for people at the bottom, contract the labor market. You'll find an amazing thing will happen. History suggests.
Yeah, working wages will rise of their own accord. A little bit about this thing that is often repeated. I did it at the introduction of this show, that this is a nation of immigrants.
It's a phrase which upsets me because it's so false. I mean, it's false. We were probably a nation of immigrants for 3 or 4 decades in the 17th century. But after that, and within our entire national history, it is not true. Most Americans have always been born here. Most Americans have always been people who were born here, and immigrants who weren't born here were a minority. So if the phrase "we are a nation of immigrants" is nonsense and it's misleading.
We're really a nation of citizens.
We're a nation of native-born citizens who have accepted a small number of immigrants.
Okay.
And done better when we kept it down to a smaller number.
Okay, great. Well, all right, call us with your comments at 1-800-5000-NET. We'll be right back.
If you're looking for job options and opportunities in today's tough economy, you need the nation's #1 job search publication, the National Business Employment Weekly, the only publication that updates you weekly on top jobs available regionally and nationwide. All kinds of jobs, professional, managerial, technical. And you'll learn how to land one of those jobs by improving the way you write your resume and the way you interview. You'll learn new strategies for earning a promotion and negotiating a raise. And twice a month, you'll get the special Franchises and Business Opportunities section, the National Business Employment Weekly, at your newsstand now, or call now and get 8 job-packed issues delivered for just $35. Also get absolutely free the Job Search Guide, a collection of the best ideas to help you land a job. Call 800-221-7600. That's 800-221-7600. The National Business Employment Weekly. If you're not looking here, you're hardly looking.
You want to lose weight,
You've even tried various yo-yo diets only to discover what you've lost isn't weight, but a lot of money. Well, now there's a better way with Easy Loss 2000.
With Easy Loss 2000, I went from a size 16 to a size 10 in 4 weeks.
I lost 85 pounds in 7 months.
Simply take 2 Easy Loss tablets a day and you'll take off the weight and feel great doing it. Easy Loss 2000, now with chromium bicolinate, is 100% natural. Known by many as the miracle mineral, chromium bicolinate has received national media coverage and is endorsed by eminent physicians and nutritionists alike. Announcing BioResearch Labs 2-for-1 offer. With all the media excitement surrounding aminophylline, a key ingredient in our cellulite thigh cream, we are pleased to include a full 4-ounce bottle free when you call now and order your 30-day supply of Easy Loss 2000 for just $19.95.
To order, use your credit card. Sorry, no CODs. Call 1-800-332-4888 or send check or money order for $19.95 plus $4.95 shipping to the address on your screen.
Fax us at 202-544-2405. Email us at border@fcref.org or call us at 1-800-5000-NET. BorderLine also has a website. You can find us at http://net.fcref.org. Once you get there, you'll be able to communicate directly to FAIR's website as well. Okay. We're back and we're talking about U.S. immigration history with Professor Otis Graham. And we're going to continue that conversation, but we've got some calls from you, the viewers, and I'd like to take those now. First one we've got is James from Santa Fe, New Mexico. You're on the air with BorderLine.
Thank you for your program. I appreciate your taking my call. I want to adamantly disagree with a previous caller who said that we shouldn't control our borders. We should let any and everyone come in that wants to. We're becoming a welfare state, and I want to specifically address the situation with Native Americans. Right now, as I understand it, they claim to have 557 separate little nations within this country, claiming to be sovereign, not subject to the laws of the United States or the states in which they live. And I want to point out that some of the other minority groups have taken the tack of sovereignty from the Native Americans, and I don't think this country can survive with hundreds and hundreds of separate little groups of minority people. We're all
James?
Americans. We should all be treated the same without, and we should control our borders.
James, I think that's a great point. Otis?
My comment on that, when I'm not a specialist in Indian affairs, he's raised an interesting question, which many of us thought about. One of the differences between now and 100 years ago, when we had a large wave and we absorbed it, is that we have a much more fragmented and a much more rights-oriented and tribal-oriented society now. Our commitment to assimilation is very qualified and in some cases attacked by various groups. He's touching on that. So that's one of the things that has really changed.
So we got a much greater danger today of balkanization because we don't have the old settlement house movement that Americanized those immigrants around the turn of the century, demanded that they learn English, said like Teddy Roosevelt said, you become an American the minute you touch down on our shores or get out,
Without saying we should go back to exactly that, I agree with you that that's a pretty good statement of what we used to have, and we very much don't have that situation now.
Anymore. Okay. We want to take another caller now. Howard from Cedar Falls, Iowa. You're on the air with BorderLine.
Well, gentlemen, I think that we should be able to set any type of standard we want for the people coming in, and frankly, I don't believe anyone should be allowed to immigrate here unless they have a sponsor. And this one requirement, everyone coming here should have their understanding of English.
Okay, I think Howard, you make some good points.
He said it again. Somebody said it again. 100 years ago, when we successfully absorbed an enormous wave, one of the things that was different was that there was an insistence that English was the language you would immediately adopt and adapt to. and that's in various ways a different situation now.
And now, you know, they can, immigrants come in, we'll teach them in their own native language, they teach their kids in their native language, they can vote in their foreign language, they can get a job oftentimes, and, you know, all their legal documents they have to deal with are translated for them. So instead of Americanizing the newcomers, we're actually allowing this kind of balkanization trend to continue and grow.
I think we're asking the right questions. If we had a successful absorption 100 years ago, do we have all the materials in place to do it again? And I think when you make that assessment, you find a lot of things have changed, and we're still absorbing the millions. I mean, the flows now are equivalent, essentially equivalent to 100 years ago. But the mechanisms for handling it, I think, is weaker.
Okay, we got another caller now. Don from Wheelersburg, Ohio. You're on the air with Otis Graham.
Thank you. I'd like to make one comment to Mr. Graham, that we have laws set up in this country for immigration laws, and I think that the people that come to this country should be made to adhere to those laws, where the people that's running across the border from Mexico, say, are just really running in here trying to, you know, bring drugs or whatever in. And that's all the comment I'd like to make. I think we have laws already that should be enforced. They should enforce some of these employers in California to Texas to Florida that hire these illegal people, and that's all I got to say.
Okay, Don, thank you for your comment. I think he's really kind of a little bit mixing the issue of illegal immigration control with legal immigration and how many people we legally admit to the country. Do you have any other comment on that?
He is, but it's a confused picture now. People have a lot of sources of confusion. One of them is that we didn't have illegal immigration 100 years ago.
That's
so
right.
we've only dealt with legal immigration until lately, and Congress is having trouble with the two are actually very close together, and I think shouldn't be separated. But that's another question.
Okay, we want to hear what you think. Call us with your comments at 1-800-5000-NET.
Direct Line, live from Washington with Paul Weyrich. Probing, questioning, bringing the power players into focus, putting them on the hot seat.
In order to get the votes, what did you have to give away?
This issue is at the heart and soul, not just of the economy, but the values we have as an American people.
Direct Line, weeknights at 6 Eastern on NET, the Political News Talk Network.
The men and the machines, the technology and the atrocities, the power and the horror of 100 years of war. The complete history of 20th century conflict, the century of warfare, now available exclusively from Time Life Video. Never before has the entire history of modern conflict been brought together in one comprehensive series. You'll see action you've never seen before, and that you can't get in any store. So call now to get Air War for only $4.99. The Century of Warfare, exclusively from Time Life. It's 100 years of combat footage from both sides. Scenes that you can't get in any store. So call now before it's too late.
20-year Century of Warfare Air War video. Call 1-800-469-1500. Call now or send $4.99 plus $3.49 shipping to the address on your screen.
Direct from the nation's capital, right on Capitol Hill, starring U.S. senators, congressmen, and today's viewers. NET, the Political News Talk Network, with live and original programming that has America talking back to Washington. The Political News Talk Network, NET, is right for the times. NET is right for you.
Okay, we're back with Otis Graham, a distinguished professor of history, talking about the history of U.S. immigration. And before we carry on with our conversation here, I'd like to take another caller from one of our viewers, Tom from Columbia Crossroad, Pennsylvania. You're on the air on Borderline.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. I agree with your guest almost totally. In fact, I would like to say that I think probably we should have a moratorium on immigration for a period of time, simply because we have had successive waves of immigration for some time now. It is totally unbalanced, not only the political landscape, but the culture. And there are other countries that people can go to where there are lots of economic opportunities, but try immigrating there. When was the last time that you tried immigrating to Switzerland, for instance? Try it sometime.
Okay, I think that's a great point, Tom. Otis?
The idea of a moratorium is close to the idea of an historical pause that I've been speaking of, and is really come up in the last 5 years, but it touches American history. We didn't call it a moratorium, but I think a pause is the right word, but they're very close, and they're very healing to a society that's absorbed for a brief period of time large numbers.
Okay, I've got another call, but before we take that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why are we in this big wave of high immigration right now? I mean, what happened after World War II that changed the situation?
Underlying currents are, of course, world population and third world poverty, which have generated immigration pressures everywhere, from the south to the north. But we have to recognize that in the U.S., we had a policy decision taken in the mid-60s, in 1965, in fact, a measure pushed by Lyndon Johnson, signed by Lyndon Johnson, voted by the Congress, the Immigration Act of '65. Which they predicted would not do what it in fact did. It became the most, you could argue, one of the most nation-changing statutes ever enacted in the 1960s. It quadrupled immigration in its numbers and transformed the source countries, and is a major force over time, over a long period of time, a major demographic force in transforming the country. It was debated by the Congress and voted in the open, but the American people hardly knew what was going on and have never really ratified or fully understood, although I think they're beginning to fully understand how important the '65 Act was. That's a policy decision by our political leaders.
Okay, we've got another call right now. I'd like to talk with you, Jim from San Angelo, Texas. You're on the air with Borderline. Jim?
Yes.
If
you want to control immigration, you need to put naturalization back under complete control of the federal court and eliminate it from being a political football. Just think, amnesty has come through. In 5 years, all of those will be petitioning to bring in their spouses, their children, and you are just now beginning to see what the future holds for us.
Okay. Jim, thank you for your comment. Otis, he touched on something that also happened in recent history, and that was the amnesty for illegal immigrants in the 1986 law. Is that having a big impact now?
Well, obviously it had an enormous impact on the numbers, and the downstream family reunification effect is having. It's also a precedent. We haven't done it again, but there are always those who suggest we did it once, it solved a certain temporary problem. Whenever you do these things, they become a part of the landscape. So we're not beyond what I regard as a mistake, but it was done in '86.
In '86, okay. We got another caller now, Alan from Florida. I didn't catch exactly where you're from, but you're on the air with Borderline.
Okay, from Naples, Florida.
Naples, okay, sorry.
My question or comment is to other leading economic countries. What are some of their policies to give us some perspective on how lax the U.S. is relative to what other countries would allow?
Okay, that's a good question.
Lax. Very lax.
Very lax?
Very lax. We take in more immigrants, really, legally, than the rest of the world. There are countries like Australia that are a little bit lax, but we're the lax country. We're a country that's convinced ourselves that this is our destiny. In some way, it's connected to our identity. This was invented in the 20th century, and we've worked ourselves into a position where the U.S. seems to think, or at least the Congress seems to think.
The political elite
seems to think. The American people aren't confused about this. But the political elite seem to think that to be America, we have to absorb all the folks that want to come. This is something which is 100 years ago, our political leadership didn't talk this way or think this way, though there were, of course, pressures in this direction.
Well, the immigration right now is running, if I'm correct, and I know I am, at over 1 million a year legally in the first 5 years of the 1990s. So, I mean, there's no question that this is, and I think in 1991 we hit a peak of 1.8 million. So the volume, and that's what the American people are objecting to, is this huge volume of immigration.
We're out of line with other industrial countries. In Europe, they are, all of them in various ways, shutting down, rethinking what they're doing. You might say we're trying to rethink this year with the Congress, but I'm very saddened by the way things are going. It's hard for us, apparently, and our history, not our history, a mistaken sense of our history, which I came here tonight to talk about, is one of the major reasons we're having trouble with this question.
Okay, well, that's been very, very interesting conversation. Now, thank you to Otis Graham, distinguished professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and faculty member at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He's also the author of A Limited Bounty, The United States Since World War II. Tonight, we have looked behind the myths to find the truth about America's immigrant heritage. But for many of us involved in the debate over immigration, the issue is not the past, but the future. The experience of the past should be considered, to be sure, but what in our past has prepared us for an era in which the population of the world is tripling in the space of a single lifetime, when most of that growth is happening in countries already desperately poor, and when we are facing unprecedented strains on the ability of governments around the world to cope with the consequences of that reality. Next week, Dan Stein, the regular host of BorderLine, will return. His guest will be Republican presidential candidate Patrick Buchanan. You won't want to miss it. For the entire staff of BorderLine, I'm Casey McAlpin. Thanks for watching.